Hey peers, welcome back to the Modern Myths podcast. I'm Vince Ventura, Artistic Director of 12 Peers Theater, and your host for the Modern Myths podcast. This week, we have Jim Knable, playwright of The Curse of Atreus, on the line with us, and we're going to be talking about his background, his playwriting process, some of the larger themes in The Curse of Atreus, and his advice to young artists. But before we jump into the interview, I wanted to take a moment to let you know about a special offer for Modern Myths listeners. If you've ever wanted to create your own podcast, Blueberry is offering 1 month free hosting at blueberry.com if you use the promo code 12peers. Blueberry is a podcast hosting site that offers unlimited downloads, no contracts, it's optimized for iTunes and for podcasting, and they even have a WordPress integration. So head over to blueberry.com, that's BLUBRRY.com, and use the promo code 12peers for 1 month free hosting. Now, let me welcome Jim Knable to the Modern Myths podcast. Jim, why don't we get started by having you tell us a little bit about your background?
I started writing plays when I was about 14 or so. There was a young playwrights contest in California that I entered, and somehow I was successful with it, and I kept writing plays and entering contests, and that helped me get into college, and then I wrote a lot of plays in college, and kind of produced them on my own with friends, and then ended up going to grad school for dramatic writing after that, and that led sort of straight into like a professional production life for me.
So what's your typical playwriting process like?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that I realized is that there is no one way to write a play, and then I try to stay open to whatever is right for the particular play that I'm writing. So if it's something that I wrote 20 pages of 5 years ago and I come across it and suddenly I find it interesting and want to go back and do something with it, then I kind of embrace that. If it's something where I know I have to get something done very quickly, like in a couple weeks or a month or something, then I can dive in and do that. So I don't really have one process. It's more like just staying open to what feels right for whatever project it is I'm working on.
So when you're writing a play and you feel stuck, what do you do?
I would say taking a break, taking a walk, doing something completely different, but still kind of stimulating intellectually or artistically, like going to a museum and seeing some art. For a while, I was trying something where, again, I guess I don't really have a tried and true, but every time I would sit down to start rewriting something, before I would start rewriting, I would write a little fake new play just to kind of get the juices flowing. So maybe that's something too, take a little break if I'm stuck and write something ridiculous and then come back to what I was working on and so on.
Have any of those smaller plays turned into anything? Anything that you might want to have produced?
I don't think so exactly, but some of them have turned into like song ideas and other kinds of creative, things. I'm also a songwriter, so I'm always looking for, ideas that drive whatever.
I had no idea you were a songwriter. Have you ever written a musical or anything?
Not exactly musicals. I've written a children's opera with my brother, Sonny Knable. He's more of a composer. And that's been produced a few times. We wrote something together a little while ago that was sort of like a musical, but we need to develop more what that is. So not exactly, really I haven't had the occasion to cross the streams too much.
So the characters in The Curse of Atreus feel so real and so grounded in reality, which I think helps contribute to the mythic tones. Do you have any tips for writing dialogue for any young playwrights out there?
Well, I mean, I've done some teaching of playwriting, and one of the exercises I'll have students do is to go, I live in New York, so I have them go and record a subway conversation, just to kind of get the rhythm of how people actually talk and how they cut each other off, and how little they say, how much they say, what it tells you about a character if they say a lot and the other person doesn't say anything. So, I think listening to people and really enjoying the way that people talk is a big part of it for me, and something I'd encourage people to do if they're interested in writing plays.
I absolutely remember doing that exercise in acting class.
Sure. Yeah, well, that's another thing I would add, is take acting class. That really helped me as a playwright. I was a theater studies major in college, and acting classes really helped me understand what a playwright needs to do, hopefully, to give an actor what an actor needs to do what they do.
So when you were younger, or when you were studying, who was the one person who had the biggest influence on your career as a playwright?
I think I got really kind of totally seduced into theater by Sam Sheppard. So I come back to him a lot. So that's, also in the line with O'Neill and, Albee and writers who are, both, like you say, kind of grounded in some kind of reality, but always a little bit, on the heightened side of, images and theatricality and myth, and kind of reaching back to the Greeks and all kinds of stuff like that.
So what was it that got you hooked on theater? Do you have a favorite moment or a favorite production from when you were a child?
Well, as far as seeing a play that I didn't write, which, sounds kind of self-important, but a children's theater group called the Fantasy Theater came to my came to my elementary school when I was about in fourth grade. I lived in Sacramento, grew up in Sacramento. And they did, it was a children's play, but it was not condescending, and it was fun and smart, and kind of really turned me on and woke me up to what a theatrical experience could be. And that was in an auditorium with a bunch of other kids sitting on the ground. But it was just like, oh, this is great that we, not only are using our imaginations, but can participate in this sort of adult humor world from a child's perspective as well. And then, later on, let's see, I saw Angels in America, which I think was still one of my, biggest moments, just sitting in the theater. Started with kind of like sitting up at the top of the theater in a really cheap seats, looking over the lights that were on the stage, and then they brought us down for the second act. And so that made a big impact. And then a theatrical moment for me, too, is the first time I heard actors getting ready to audition for a play that I wrote when I was 15. And just that, again, sort of being sort of a kid, but in this adult world where people were really taking my writing seriously, and also just sort of like the perverse joy of hearing people say things you've imagined in your head. Not only saying them, but lots of people practicing them, and then they do them for you. And, so that's definitely a big rush, and seduced me into the theater and playwriting.
So out of all the plays that you've written, and it sounds like you've written a lot over your career, do you have a favorite?
No. I would feel bad to say I had a favorite. It's like children, right? There are some plays that are more like cornerstones for me, I think, but I think that has to do with when I wrote them and how they kind of opened up something new for me as a writer. So my play Spain was kind of a big professional jumping off point for me out of grad school, and that's a play that, since that grad school time, kept getting produced in sort of bigger, more interesting ways for about 9 years. So I don't know if that's my favorite play, but I still really respect that play, which is kind of weird to say. But and then I have some other plays like that are departures from what I was doing before. That I think Curse of Atreus is like that. For me, it's something where it was something I very specifically wanted to write in a particular way at a particular time. And since then, not that I've written plays just like that, but it's opened up that possibility for me.
So once a play is going to be produced, how hands-on do you like to get with the whole production process?
Well, ideally as much as I can. Selfishly, just because I love being in the rehearsal room. That's kind of my favorite part of the experience. The part where you sit in the audience with real audience members and watch the plays is kind of torture to me. But it's really fun to be in the room with actors and director and designers and, kind of working on the play from the inside out. And, I'm doing my thing with rewriting and they're doing their thing with their crafts and, that sense of real collaboration.
So does most of your rewriting happen once the show's been picked up and before rehearsals, or before the show's been picked up, or do you do a lot of rewriting during rehearsals?
It's a lot of all of the above. So definitely before I get into a rehearsal situation, I've probably gone through 3 or 4 drafts of a play, unless it's like a one-act play that somebody commissioned that's just being thrown out. But then once we get into like a rehearsal mode, whether that's for a production or a reading or whatever, then I expect to be on duty all the time and kind of like ready to jump in on a word level to slashing pages to coming up with whole new scenes, because I realized there was the most important thing in the play wasn't written, and that tends to come out in the most meaningful way, I think, in rehearsal or workshop.
So let me ask you this. Do you have a favorite playwright or a favorite songwriter now that we know you also write songs?
I got to think for a second. I mean, usually my quick answers are Sam Sheppard, Bob Dylan, lately Leonard Cohen a lot. I mean, because my career I see is kind of, it's playwriting, it's songwriting, it's everything that's kind of meant to be written and heard. So it's those kind of people.
Well, on that note, if playwriting wasn't your career, is there another career you can think of that you might be happy doing?
Any other kind of writer. I mean, I think I always knew I wanted to be some kind of writer, and I do like performing somehow too. So maybe that would have been in the form of a speech writer, gives speeches, and I teach a lot, so that's another thing I do. Anything involved with creating with words.
So there are a lot of mythic themes in this play. What made you want to utilize the myth of the House of Atreus in a sort of modern context?
Well, actually, it started with a dream that I had. That's going back to your process question. I don't typically have dreams and then decide to write plays based on those dreams, but I had a really vivid dream in 2014 in summer when Ferguson was going down and everything else around that. And in the dream, I was very specifically this cop, a white cop with a motorcycle problem, and my wheel was broken, but it was a very like theatricalized version of that problem where I was like holding the wheel between my hands as if I were the motorcycle. And then I shifted back and forth between being that person to being the kid who would become Atreus in the play, who's a young man who's driving around something. In the dream, I think it was something like a golf cart or something. And I was just very paranoid about getting pulled over, and I felt like this inevitability to the fact that I would be pulled over. And I don't typically have dreams where I'm more than one person at the same time, but I really kept going back and forth between being this cop with a broken wheel and this kid and this golf cart. And then we actually somehow converged at this outside a garage, and I actually kind of saw some version of the character who was the Grace character who runs the garage. And in the dream, the kid wasn't necessarily her son, but that came out when I started writing fairly quickly. That's where that was going. So yeah, it was came to me in a dream state, and it definitely related to everything I was thinking about. And then I think also it was tied into, I had been thinking a lot about the Oresteia and the actual Curse of Atreus because of my teaching life, where I'd been working with a student on Greek plays and really thinking about that form and the idea of the 3 unities, and conceptually was intrigued by wanting to do something with that. So then, as a playwright, the bells and whistles went off probably immediately after I woke up, and I was like, this is exactly what I should be working on next. So I kind of wrote very quickly and rewrote very quickly after that.
The ending of The Curse of Atreus is extremely powerful and really timely as well. Would you call this a Black Lives Matter play?
Yeah. Yeah, and while, I definitely have strong feelings about, what happens to Black people in terms of feeling dehumanized and victimized and just having to walk around being paranoid, drive around being paranoid. I feel that. And I didn't actually set out to write, though, a play that would make a political statement. I was just blown away by my feeling. It was very visceral of how tragic with a capital T in terms of like faded and cyclical and just never ending this keeps feeling. I don't want to be too bleak about it. It's not like I don't have any hope, but I think there was something about those Greek tragedies too, where they confronted that feeling, and the house of Atreus is a cursed house where murder upon murder happens, and son kills mother because mother had killed father, and before that there was a brother who cooked the sons in a stew, and it's like this. They can't stop, and I think it's that felt so compelling to me and so related to what's going on that while I'm interested in a political stance, I didn't really write the play just to take a political stance, but to be a playwright and to try to do what Edward Albee tells us to do, which is reflect the world in our writing. So,
just a moment ago, you mentioned the 3 unities. Tell us a little bit more about those and how they relate to the Curse of Atreus.
Time is supposed to be something that's less than 24 hours. This is definitely in real time. Plays takes place in one location, and action. There's like one basic storyline that you follow. There aren't a lot of subplots or things like that. So those are the 3 Aristotelian 3 unities that you get in a play like Oedipus, especially. In terms of how that informed, writing about the topic or these characters, it did feel right in terms of having like a pressure cooker situation. And I think as I was writing, I didn't exactly know that Gerald was going to get hit in the head at any point, or all the details as it was going. But it was like once I'd set in motion that this was all going to be taking place in the garage in real time with some kind of, whether real or theatricalized motorcycle, and somebody would be working on the motorcycle, and so all those pieces that I think are very influenced by Sam Sheppard too. Having people do real stuff on stage goes back to the idea of you were seeing both a very true form of reality and also like this incredibly heightened form, because it is such a condensed, intense, short blast of an experience.
One question we like to be sure to ask of all of our playwrights here on the Modern Myths podcast is, how do you feel like your play contributes to a new global or new American myth?
Well, I mean, the mythos of our country is, cowboys, revolutionaries, slaves, transcendentalists, kind of radical free thinkers, and also then radicals who think that they should only care about themselves. And so it's the American myth to me is always this struggle between liberty and equality, which is more important. Should you allow to be free and do whatever you want, and not pay your taxes, and because that's good business, or should you be responsible to everybody else, and everybody should be kind of on equal footing, and the wealthy should pay higher taxes, and that to me all fits into what the American myth is and what you think of as American mythic characters. So to me, like the cop is an American myth right now. And even like the motorcycle is important to me, to have a motorcycle be part of that, I guess, because that's also feels very American. And then, where she's coming from, where the mother is coming from, who really is, I wanted her to feel like on the scale of, it's the wrong comparison, but a Medea, like a tragic heroine that ends up in a position that I feel like is a picture you would see from a Greek tragedy at the end.
Are there any other playwrights you think blend myth and theater better than the rest?
Well, okay, Sam Sheppard, I got to say again, right? He's, Buried Child, he's going after that. Curse of the Starving Class, True West, they're all going after the American myth from a point of view that, Western American.
It's interesting that you mentioned Sam Sheppard, because I always think of him as a very realist playwright, but as I sit here, I'm looking at a manuscript copy of his version of Oedipus, so it's a bit surprising to me to think of him as a mythic playwright, but there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what he was going for from fairly early on, too. I mean, he has that play, Icarus's Mother, which is an early one act of his that, and those early one acts, he has people who are in very mundane situations, and then something totally, really bizarre happens. And in this case, there's the hint towards a really mythic character who is part of the play, but isn't really part of the play. And so, yeah, I mean, I think he's always been going for that level. And I think it's his connection, to bring it back to my other hero, Bob Dylan, of wanting to get to that sort of both new and very grounded in something ancient American myth that ties into, even like the Native American past of this country that, was trampled upon, but is still like running through it like veins.
Well, Jim, I cannot say how lucky we were to have you and to have the Curse of Atreus on the Modern Myths podcast this season. Before we let you go, there's one question that we like to ask to all the playwrights who appear on the show, and that is, what is one piece of advice you could give to a young artist or a young playwright who is just starting out?
Well, in a larger sense, I think I've dropped some little advice here and there, about like taking a break from writing, walking around, going and getting inspiration from somewhere else. But do what makes you happy, I think, is a big part of it. I mean, do it because you love doing it. I mean, I actually don't subscribe to telling people like Mr. Albee did that, if there's anything else they could do, then do that. For me, it's like if you do this because you do this, and it makes you happy, then keep doing it. I don't know if that's advice or just what happens at the end of the day when I put a couple kids to bed. But yeah.
No, I think that's really great advice, actually, and I'm really glad you were on the show here to share it with us. And I'm really glad that The Curse of Atreus was a part of our season this season. I think it's a really interesting play, and I think it really hits the nail on the head with what we're trying to do in terms of myth and theater. Before I let you go, Jim, if there's anything you're working on or anything you want to plug, definitely tell us what it is.
Well, thanks so much again for allowing me to do this with you guys. It's been a great opportunity to hear the play. I haven't gotten to work on the play much in rehearsal, so this is kind of a strange backwards way to sort of actually hear some actors who worked on it, do something with it. I think it turned out very nicely. I really enjoy it. So I'm going to keep working on this play. Other plays I have some readings coming up in New York and New Jersey. I have a play that is kind of a adaptation and imagining of what it was like for Thornton Wilder, who wrote Our Town. Thornton Wilder also wrote novels, so this is about his writing of his first novel called The Kabbalah. So it's a play about a young Thornton Wilder who's a French teacher at a private school and trying to become a novelist, and how he kind of discovers himself as an artist in that process. And that's having a workshop in the spring, and it's something else I'm excited about. So those are my plugs.
Thanks, Jim, again for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much.
And that was our interview with Jim Knable, playwright of The Curse of Atreus. Definitely an insightful conversation and a very interesting guy, and a very talented playwright. And if you're a playwright and you're looking for some feedback on your script, our friends over at The Producer's Perspective are here to help. Ken Davenport and his team provide individualized script coverage with actionable feedback for your play. Head over to www.12peerstheater.org and visit our Modern Myths podcast page for more information. Well, that's it for this episode of the Modern Myths podcast. Join us next time for part 1 of It's Just Something That Happened by Alex Kump. The Modern Myths podcast is produced by 12 Peers Theater. Executive producer, Vince Ventura. Producers, Sarah Fisher, Matt Henderson, and Marcus Savage. Dramaturg, Abigail Caddy. The Curse of Atreus was written by Jim Knable and directed by Matt Henderson. The Curse of Atreus features Michael Brewer as Darrell, Sarah Williams as Grace, Lamont Walker II as Atreus. Stage directions read by Charlie Wine. Recording location generously provided by Timesys Corporation. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review.